What if I had a show where I talked to an LA Kings fan that I had never met before, and we discussed our shared love of the Kings, how we became Kings fans, maybe memories of Dustin Brown, and whatever the hell else popped in our heads? Well, that's next on this edition of Locked on LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked on LA Kings, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked on LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Please like and subscribe if you are enjoying this content. As you probably know, my name is Eddie Garcia. I'm your host of Locked on LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for almost 30 years. For the past 20 plus years at the Fox Sports Radio Network, I'm also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 16 years. And of course, a passionate LA Kings fan for the past 30 years. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. We are 2 days away from the LA Kings finally getting the second half of the season underway. And of course, 2 days away from Dustin Brown night. And I'm not going to lie, I had hopes of getting an interview with a former Kings player and teammate of Dustin Brown to talk all about number 23, but that didn't happen. But I also have been thinking about, at some point on this show, having a random Kings fan on to just talk about the Kings from a purely fan perspective. We've had Jim Fox on, Daryl Evans, Patrick O'Neill. We've had Zach Dooley, the Kings insider, Jesse Cohen from All the Kings Men. We've had a lot of guests, but I thought it would be kind of cool if I just talked to a random fan. But then who would it be? So right about the time that I figured out I wasn't going to be able to get a player to join us to talk Dustin Brown, I kept seeing some tweets from this Kings fan, and they got my attention. And his name on Twitter is, well, West Coast Hockey Bias at Marcel and Rogie. And I thought, well, this guy seems like he knows what he's talking about. Seems like maybe he's an old school fan. Well, let's contact him and see if he wants to come on the show, and let's see what happens. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I give you West Coast Hockey Bias on Twitter. His real name is Steve Keegan. Hi, Steve. How are you?
I'm random, so I'm perfect.
Well, then that fits with what we're doing here. And I found out right before the show, you've never seen this show before. Well, you know what? Maybe you'll listen and watch from now on. But
I learned a lot about you from the intro, and it sounds great. So I'm there. I'm going to do it now.
Well, I have enjoyed your tweets, and it certainly does seem like you're a knowledgeable and opinionated LA Kings fan. So that's good to talk to somebody who's like that. So
some people think so, some people not so much think so. But yeah.
All right. Well, how about just the basics? Where are you from? What do you do? And how long have you been a Kings fan?
Well, I grew up in Agora Hills. The first 5 years of my life, I was living in Westchester, and that kind of is connected to me being a Kings fan because my dad was a plumber, and he was actually one of the plumbers that worked on the pipes that put in the ice in the Fabulous Forum. And so when they were working on the Forum, they, as a thank you to the workers, gave all the workers free tickets to a game. And my brother, who was 9 years older than me, I hadn't been born yet. I was born in 1972. And obviously this was 1967. So my brother was a little boy at the time. My dad took him to the game. They immediately fell in love with the high-paced action. And as you know, going to a game is very different than watching it on TV, especially back then. And so they immediately fell in love with it. My dad, we lived obviously in Westchester, so we were very close to the Culver City ice rink. And my dad got my brother skating lessons, and before you knew it, he was playing hockey. And it kind of took off from there, where we just became a hockey family and just sort of obsessed with it. My dad every year would go down at the beginning of the year, and he'd get tickets for as many Saturday night hockey games as he could. We weren't a very rich family, but at the time, tickets were cheap, so they were trying to get people in the building. You could even get kids rates for like $5. And so we would sit in section 10, colonnade, center ice, and almost every Saturday night that there was a hockey game, and that's kind of like where it went from there.
Well, that's very cool. Knowing that you obviously this has been a family thing for you, and this is something that you've has been a part of your life since you were very young. Real quick, just for me, I didn't get into the Kings until I was in college. I grew up in Central California. Didn't know much about hockey at all, but I was a sports nerd. I loved everything about sports. And I think one of the things that turns people off about hockey is that they're afraid to learn something they're not familiar with, and that intrigued me about hockey because I thought I knew everything, as a kid about all the other sports, but I didn't know about this, and so that really intrigued me, and I wanted to know more and more. And then when I got into college, my roommate was a huge Kings fan, and I started watching games with him. And then the first year I really invested in the Kings was the year they went to the Stanley Cup final and lost to Montreal. And getting that experience of playoff hockey for the first time, I was sold for life. I'm like, this is definitely something that I want to be a part of. And I slowly phased out the NBA, and really, I haven't watched an NBA game in years now. And I'm like all invested in hockey, so much so that, like I said, I've been doing a hockey podcast for going on 17 years now. I work at Fox Sports Radio, and I'm known as the hockey guy at Fox Sports Radio. So it's been a lot of fun. But I was a Gretzky fan. I mean, that is to say, now I liked Wayne Gretzky, but he was one of the big reasons why I did get into it. It was the Gretzky era when he came that intrigued me, got me interested. What's this all about? So that's my era of Kings fandom. I noticed on your Twitter account, the little avatar picture, is that a Rogie Vachon goalie mask that's on there?
The Rogie Vachon goalie mask. He was my first hero growing up. In fact, I got a story about Rogie related to my brother when he started playing. Back then, you could go. The Kings actually practiced at the Culver Ice Rink, and we'd go in, and half the city didn't even know we had a hockey team back then. So it was like not a big deal to just go in and sort of like watch them before your team went on the ice after the Kings to practice. And so my brother was just like a little guy at the time and got a little overzealous and ran onto the ice like when not all the Kings had come off the ice yet. And he ran right into Rogie Vachon and knocked him on his butt. And it was sort of like the scene in Curb Your Enthusiasm where Larry David leans his legs out. He's got like seats on the floor, and he trips Shaquille O'Neal and breaks his leg. We all just sort of gasped, and we're like, did my little brother just, or did my brother just ruin the Kings season? But Rogie started laughing. He realized this little peewee knocked him down, and everyone was like, okay, he's okay. He didn't tear his ACL. So, but yeah, that was, and then, so that was sort of my era. Like when I really started was Rogie, and then of course Butch Goring was my first sort of like. I was in tears when they traded Butch Goring. That happened maybe like 2 months after the Miracle on Ice happened in the Olympics, and we made that trade for Billy Harris, one of the worst trades in Kings history. But don't get me started on the history of Kings trades. But yeah, and then of course, Marcel Dion, Triple Crown Line, all those guys, Jimmy Fox, Bernie Nichols. I mean, all the names. So that's sort of where and then actually it's kind of funny that I hear that a lot. I mean, obviously Gretzky did so much for the sport in Southern California. And like I said, made people aware we had a team and all of these things. At the time, I hated the Edmonton Oilers so much because they were our main rival. They were our Smythe Division rival. And I mean, if you've watched, the recap of the Miracle in Manchester and everything, part of the reason why it was so great was because they were sort of snickering at the Kings, and they were so arrogant, and they just hated, they were just showed us no respect. And as a Kings fan in those days, I mean, you were just used to being so disrespected by like the East Coast media. That's why I'm called West Coast hockey bias. It's like they never gave LA fans any credit for knowing anything about hockey. Like, go watch the Lakers. You don't know anything. And so it was just very hard to get any kind of respect, for our team or whatever. And so I think that was why that was so, powerful when we actually beat them. But because of all that, when I first heard the trade for Gretzky, I kind of had mixed emotions about it. I mean, today it would be like if Sidney Crosby went and played for the Flyers or something like that. It's just, you're so programmed to not like him and just be like, this guy is just, every time we play him, he scores 4 points against us. And I hate this guy, he's so arrogant. And then I was forced to kind of be like, oh no, I have to I was sort of like, Jimmy Carson's going to be the next Wayne Gretzky, and we're giving up all these picks. And then of course you see him the opening day and you see how excited the city is about hockey, and you've tried so hard to get people into hockey and trying to bring your friends to games, and they're like, Steve, I'd rather watch you mow your lawn than go to a hockey game. I could not get anyone to go to a hockey game with me. And like you say, like once you go, it's a different experience, and you can't really, especially back then, it didn't have HDTVs. There was maybe 8 games televised per year on TV. It had something called On TV. I don't know if you remember that, but it was like an over-the-air pay-per-view channel, and this was sort of before the days of cable, where you'd put like an antenna on your roof, and you could get an extra eight games of Kings hockey. So it was like, maybe 16 games a year. Half of them were tape delayed. It was just impossible to get people interested in hockey back then. But now, it's just so different. And that trade really, a third of the teams in the league probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that trade. So
it's very cool to hear that perspective of somebody who's been there sort of from the beginning, to see where it's evolved now. I kind of got in, I guess, halfway, compared to where you were. And then, the next generation of Kings fans, the Stanley Cup years and that kind of thing. So, I will say this: when I got on board, when they went to the Stanley Cup final and, winning Game 7 in Maple Leaf Gardens, and Gretzky has the hat trick and all that, and I was like, this is amazing. I love this. And then little did I know that there was going to be a lot of bad times after that. And there were times where, and my poor wife is a diehard San Diego / LA Chargers fan. And she's, she sometimes will tell me, do you think that I'll ever see a championship in my life? And the answer is, I don't know. There's no guarantees we're ever going to see it. And I know there were times as a Kings fan where I really wondered if we would ever see a championship. And now we look back on it, and it's easy to forget about that in a way, but there were some very lean times there. But then obviously, magic happened 10 years ago, and then repeated itself 2 years later. And it really has changed a lot of things as far as the attitude towards the Kings and things like that. And who knows, hopefully we're building towards something like that again. But how do you feel about, as someone who's been a hardcore Kings fan for a long time, how do you feel about, some of the people that came on board when the Kings won the Stanley Cup? Are you okay with that? Or are you just happy that people are interested in hockey, regardless of where they jumped on, where their jumping on point was?
Yeah. This is what I wished for my whole life, was that I would be able to go on and talk hockey with people, because the only people I could talk hockey with was my dad and my brother, because they were the only ones that do anything. Now we have these great podcasts. We have this entire network of fans on Twitter. My dad unfortunately passed away about 5 years ago, and I didn't have anyone to have that hour-long conversation where I'd call up my dad and we kind of discuss the world's problems, and then we'd be like, okay, now let's talk about something important. Let's talk about the Kings, and we would talk for about an hour, and I kind of, it was a major hole when in me, that I didn't get to do that, because it's like the scene from City Slickers, when they talk about why they like baseball. And they're like, I don't know. It's like, but when I was 13 and I couldn't agree with anything with my dad, I could still talk about baseball. Well, it was like that with me, with my dad and hockey, and going to those Saturday night games. And it was almost like church for us, so I just absolutely love it. The only thing I'm sad about is that we didn't really, capitalize on those on these new fans who were getting excited after we won these, 41 playoff games in 3 years. I think if you counted that up, that's almost the entirety of the amount of playoff games the Kings had won for their history prior to that. And so for us to do that and be like, okay, we've arrived and everyone has to talk about us now because we're relevant, and then to be irrelevant for the 9 years after that, I think it's really sad to me to look at the crypt and see, it 2/3 full with half the fans are away fans. It seems like some nights where I was expecting it to just be take off and be this is what we are now. Like before Mario Lemieux came to the Penguins, they drew even less than the Kings.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a hockey town in Pittsburgh. They almost moved a couple times.
Yeah.
And then when they started winning, now it's just like, oh, I've always been a Pittsburgh Penguins fan. It's just like, so I was kind of hoping it would be something like that, but it just feels like we sort of missed the boat a little bit and stayed bad a little too long. And now it's like we have some work to do, kind of rehabilitating the Kings and getting people excited about Kings hockey again. And I think if we don't win a playoff round this year, this will tie the longest the Kings have ever gone without winning a playoff round. It's very hard to go 9 years and not win a playoff round and generate any kind of excitement for a sport. So I really hope, we take the next step soon and we make that big trade that made us relevant, like the Mike Richards move, like the Jeff Carter move. You have to at some point be bold and take that next step and, just, trust your drafting, trust what you've done, and be like, okay, this is what we do. We got to go for it. We can't just, hoard picks for another 5 years and hopefully maybe one day in the year 2030 we'll have a good team. It's important. You have to actually do something. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, well, you've touched on it, and we'll definitely talk a little bit more about kind of the current Kings and what's going on with them. But real quick, I need to let people know that today's episode of Locked On LA Kings is brought to you by FanDuel. And this year, it's the only app you need at your Super Bowl party, America's #1 sports book. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sports book in America. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features to make betting on sports easy and fun. Download the FanDuel app. And you can bet on Super Bowl 57 with the no sweat first bet feature. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads. Who will score a touchdown? FanDuel Sports app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So the Kings certainly are in an interesting position right now. A team that certainly appears to be improving, that appears to be on the right track. But I think the big question now, and I did an episode on this yesterday, was, as you mentioned, Rob Blake. At this point, is he going to be bold? Is he going to be aggressive? Or does he feel like it's not the right time yet? I know, like Dean Lombardi, as you said, had a plan, get these pieces in place. And then when he finally felt there were a piece or two away, go out and make those trades to bring in those final pieces to become a Stanley Cup contender. So you talk about being bold. It remains to be seen what's going to happen. But what are your thoughts on what Rob Blake should do or will do at the trade deadline?
Well, I mean, we still live in a league here that's has a lot of parity in it, and you're seeing that right now with that, just making that one big Kevin Fiala move, that we went from having the worst offense in the league practically to now a top 10 offense, I think, last time I checked, and suddenly our power play has turned around. So it's just you can look at what the Oilers did at the deadline last year when they looked like they may not even make the playoffs, and then suddenly they sign Evander Kane, and it was the difference in not only making the playoffs but beating us in the first round. And so, one big player like that can really make a difference in a league like this. And you just see, what a difference Phoenix Copley made just by playing at a level that was at the NHL level in goal for us. So now, like, what kind of a difference would it make if we got somebody like Varlamov, who has a .918 save percentage instead of a .900 save percentage? Like, where does that take us in the next level? I think it's very hard to judge where a team's at when you're not getting good goaltending. It's because, you can say like, oh, well, there was a defensive breakdown here, and that's why this goalie gave up this goal. But at the same time, a lot of times there are defensive breakdowns and the goalie saves your bacon. And so, it's very hard to judge even the defense. I mean, there were lots of defensive breakdowns in 2012. That's like Jonathan Quick had like a .959 save percentage in the playoffs. I mean, there were lots. There is no perfect defense out there. I think the last time I checked, the Kings were giving up, I think, the 5th least shots from the slot in the entire league. I mean, that's actually pretty good defense. Like, I don't think you can complain too much about that. They're going to make mistakes. I mean, especially the younger guys, especially when you have guys playing on their offside, and they're a second-year player. I get on Dursey as much as any of the Kings fans online. He drives me nuts sometimes. But at the same time, you have to take a step back and be like, this dude's in his 2nd year. He's the same age that Jake Muzzin was when he broke into the league. Jake Muzzin made all kinds of mistakes when he first came up. And, you have to give him a little bit of slack, because I don't think a lot of fans really realize what a big deal it is for a righty to play on the left side like that. There's so many plays where, you can make a clean breakout pass if you're on the right side of the ice, versus I'm just going to have to flip it out over the boards on a backhander just to get it over the blue line and clear the zone. And then, it's basically a turnover because, you couldn't make a clean breakout pass. So, I think if the Kings address those 2 issues, they get their 3 lefties, 3 righties in order, maybe put a little bit of size on their blue line and a little bit more grit, because when you get into the playoffs, it's a 5-on-5 game in the playoffs. I always think that the team that has the best 5-on-5 team usually wins. I think that was the case with the Kings in 2012 and 2014. But I think the goaltending thing is the main thing. And it's kind of scary, because you don't want to get into like a rental situation where you're giving up like a key piece for a guy who plays 20 games for you and then he's gone. But at the same time, it's like, you can't just write off the season because you don't have a goalie. And they need to win a playoff round. They need to start making some progress here. I think just from a financial standpoint, every home playoff game you play generates between $2 and $3 million worth of income for your franchise. So if you don't make the playoffs, you at a minimum you're probably going to lose, $6-7 million as a franchise. And so if you don't ever advance past the first round, you don't have to do that too many years in a row where it really starts to impact the whole team. And plus, you also need to start winning. You need to start developing a winning culture. You can't just tank every year and then expect these guys to know how to win once you have like a certain amount of good players in your barn. You have to actually compete every year, I think. So
I know a lot of Kings fans are having a tough time with the Jonathan Quick thing. I don't know, how you feel about it. Obviously professional sports, it's a obviously results oriented business. And if you're not getting it done, but then again, this is a guy who is the greatest goalie in Kings history. Sorry, Rogie Vachon.
But I don't think Rogie Vachon should be playing either. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No. Right. It's a tough decision and we don't like to see it, but at the same time, the reality is what the reality is. So sounds like you're one of those Kings fans that's ready to thank you, Jonathan Quick, for what you've done, but it's time. It may be time to move on, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is, this business of we're not loyal to Jonathan Quick. Come on, they gave him a 10-year contract. That's so loyal that they don't even allow that anymore. You know what I mean? It's just and the whole reason for the 10 years and the no trade clause in that deal is it's almost like a given that at the last couple of those years he wasn't going to be very good, and so it was also a front loaded deal. I think we paid him $2.5 million this year. The cap hit is $5.8 million, but the actual money, so we only owe him like $1 million right now. And he's a big boy. He's a professional. I don't think that, and he understands winning and putting the team first. Yeah. And I don't, and that's why he's a good leader. And even if we had to healthy scratch him, or something like that, and to carry a third goalie, that's just something we may have to do. I don't think that you can, just sacrifice with the other 23 guys that are selling out every night trying to win something because of your ego or you need. What are we talking about here? He's going to play an extra 8 games for the rest of like I said, Marcel Dion was an incredible king. I don't think anyone thinks of him as any less of a king because he finished his career with the Rangers. Do you? I mean, like I don't. There's of all the guys on those rafters that whose jerseys retired, only one played every game with the Kings until, of course, we do Dustin Brown. But I mean, it's almost like I don't want to say childish. I don't want to insult anybody because I understand the emotions of that come along with your favorite player, but at the same time, it's like I also don't want to see him embarrass himself. I want to remember Jonathan Quick as Jonathan Quick. I don't want to remember him as like the famous example is Willie Mays, like held on forever, and he just kind of was just flopping around in the outfield and couldn't do anything. And it's just like, is that how you want to remember Jonathan Quick? But I don't know. It's hard because of the emotions of it. But that's why fans make terrible GMs.
You wouldn't know that by what you read on Twitter, though. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's hard. I get criticized a lot because I'm very hard on the Kings, but I actually have a theory about it, and I'll tell you why I'm hard on the Kings. Because Lakers fans are hard on the Lakers, and Dodgers fans are hard on the Dodgers. And the two teams that I like, the Angels and Kings, the fans are so used to losing that they're happy with making the playoffs. And they have very, very, if the Dodger, go listen to the Dodger fans. They could be in first place 8 years in a row. And if they don't win the World Series, they're pissed off and they want to fire the coach.
I work with a lot of them. So no,
you're exactly right. But at the same time, it's like, that's a winner mentality. I mean, like, you're expecting excellence. And I think especially until we won the Stanley Cup, the expectations of the Kings were very, very low. It was like if the Kings made the playoffs and won a playoff round, it was a successful season because we could never win the cup. You know what I mean? And I think that changed a little bit after we won. But now I see us kind of like going back into that, where it's just sort of like, you can't criticize him. He won a Stanley Cup with us 10 years ago. It's like, well, yeah, I can't criticize him because that was then and this is now, and I want to win another Stanley Cup before I die. Like I don't want to just, this isn't like a trip down memory lane for me. Like I want to actually see good hockey. I want to see, the Kings. I'm a Kings fan before I'm a fan of any player. Right. Like the players come and go. The Kings and the health of the franchise or whatever is what I'm interested in. And so I think actually, I mean, I think Rob Blake takes way too much criticism in that. I think he's done an incredible job. He was given such a bad hand. The cupboard was completely bare when he took over. We had probably the worst cap situation in hockey. And I mean, within the span of like 3 years, he was able to like give us the number one ranked prospect pool. And, I think we're actually set up pretty well cap wise for the future with, between Quick coming off the books, Kopitar's going to have his last year's next year. And we got all these guys going to be performing on ELCs. I think we're actually in pretty good shape. I mean, it's going to be hard for every team. And I'm not too concerned about, the Cal Peterson contract as much as some people are, because it's almost impossible not to have a dud contract. You go around the league, everyone's got the Dion Phaneuf is coming off the books at the end of this year. We're still paying him more. We're paying him more than like 8 guys that are on the Kings current roster this year. So it happens, but I think we can figure that out. We'll work our way around it.
I got a Dustin Brown question for you, and you're a perfect person to, I think, give a strong opinion on this. But real quick, I need to also let our listeners and our viewers know that this episode of Locked On Kings is also brought to you by Built Bar. Looking for a delicious treat and don't want all the fat and calories, you got to try a Built Bar. They are so delicious that you won't know they're good for you. They're covered in 100% real chocolate. They come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. They have 130 calories, 4 grams of fat with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now all you need to do is, you don't have to just order them online at built.com. You can still do that, but you can go to your local Walmart or Sam's Club, and they are in the pharmacy section. They also have, in addition to the new flavors, old favorites like cookies and cream, double chocolate, and coconut puffs. Those are Built Bars, protein bars that taste like candy bars. All right, Steve. I have said I believe Dustin Brown is the greatest king of all time. I'm not saying he's the greatest player to ever wear a King sweater, but I think he's the greatest king of all time. What are your thoughts on that statement?
Well, he's definitely the greatest king captain. I mean, as far like you say, it's I think as far as skill, I mean that's a different issue, but um, yeah, I mean, like I think I don't, and I think this is the disconnect when you had people ripping on the Kings for giving him a statue. I don't think until you've seen, like, you were talking about earlier, I didn't think I would ever see the Kings win a Stanley Cup. I remember coming home, driving down the 405 with my dad one time. I think we had just been knocked out by the Oilers. And I was like sulking, I'm like 9 or something like that. I was sulking. And he said, hey, he goes, I still get emotional even thinking about this now, but he said, hey, one day we're going to win that cup. It's going to be sitting at that center ice, and I'm going to be there with you watching it. He goes, I may not even be around. I may be in heaven, but I'll be there. You buy me a seat, and I'll be there sitting there watching it with you. And then it happened, So like I think it was definitely something that I definitely questioned if I would ever see that. And I just think that people don't totally understand, I talked about it the other tweeted out the other day about it. The guy has had the most hits in NHL history as recorded since they've been recording it, and for all the talk about him being a dirty player from Vancouver Canuck fans and everything, I think he was suspended one time for Jason Palmaville, and it was actually like a reverse hit, it wasn't even that dirty. And then there was I think he had like a 1-game suspension. Just imagine like how hard that would be to throw over 3,000 hits in the NHL with the force that Dustin Brown hit guys and not get suspended. You would almost just by accident hit someone in a way that you're going to get suspended. So, and just not only that, but to be that physical and to almost never be hurt. And and I almost never saw him complain to the referees. I mean, usually you see tough guys are always screaming at the referee. What do you mean I got the? Usually, if he takes a penalty, he goes straight to the box. If he got lit up, he wouldn't try to fight anybody because he got lit up. He'd be like, "You got me," and then he would come out and try and get him the next time out. And I think that was my favorite thing about Dustin Brown is he's just an honest hockey player. He just always came out and get 6-7 hits every game, lead the team in shots, just wouldn't give up. Even in those years where the fans were ripping on him because he wasn't producing goals, you'd look on the score sheet and he'd have like 8 shots. It's not like the dude wasn't trying. He would come out every game and realize that people are paying big bucks to see him play, and he was a professional. Came out every night, and you'd see these tapes of him on YouTube working out like an animal, just just unbelievable workouts this guy was doing to just stay healthy for as long as he did. And that's what leaders do. They don't run their mouth. They don't, we're going to, it's like he didn't have to. He just came to work every day, whether it was practice or the game. And you just felt like you never got cheated watching the guy. And I think that's my favorite thing about Dustin Brown. That's what I'll remember him for. So.
Steve, good stuff, man. Really appreciate it. Clearly, I think I wouldn't say it was a random choice. I thought it was an informed choice, but you've never physically talked to someone before. You never know how it's going to work out. But I think I did a pretty good job picking our first ever fan interview, and really enjoyed hearing what you had to say. It was great to meet you, and hopefully we've turned you on to our show, and you can rip on me on Twitter when I say something dumb and whatnot. But no, I'd love to meet up with you at a game sometime and talk some hockey. And I really appreciate your time and sharing some of your memories of the Kings and Dustin Brown and everything else.
Well, thanks, Eddie, and I will definitely check this out.
All right, I appreciate it, Steve. Thank you so much, and enjoy. If you're going to be out there, enjoy Dustin Brown night, or if you're watching it on TV. But looking forward to it, and hopefully we'll have some fun things to talk about for the rest of the season with the Kings.
All right, man. Take care.
All right. Take care. You too. All right. That was Steve Keegan. I think that went pretty well. I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. I would say based on that conversation, that we'll try and do something like that again at some point. So I do want to remind you guys that you've got one more day to get your thoughts in on Dustin Brown. We're going to have a special Dustin Brown Feedback Friday show. If you want to email me with any of your favorite Dustin Brown memories, stories, just your feelings on his career, if you want to agree or disagree with me that he's the greatest king of all time at this point, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE, lockedoneddie@gmail.com. You can also, if you're watching on YouTube and you want to put the comments down below, I will read those and check those out as well. So looking forward to Dustin Brown night on our Dustin Brown Feedback Friday show. If you want to follow us on Twitter, we're at Locked On LA Kings, on Instagram at Locked On LA Kings as well. And before we say goodbye, I want to remind you to check out Locked On NHL Prospects. It's your daily podcast covering the next generation of hockey superstars leading up to the NHL draft, plus NHL draft rankings and top prospect comparisons for every team. Locked On NHL Prospects, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And again, if you'd like to follow Steve on Twitter, it is at Marcel and Rogie. And I would imagine you could probably do a search on West Coast Hockey Bias and find his Twitter feed as well to check him out. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you for listening and watching Locked On LA Kings. Have a great day. And as always, go Kings go.